Hello, and welcome back to Secret Sonics. I'm your host, Ben Wallach. My guest today is Alex Crescioni. Alex is a Los Angeles-based guitarist, music producer, mixing and mastering engineer, and the owner of Stygian Sound. Alex and I connected recently thanks to our mutual friend and fellow podcaster, Travis Ferentz. I invited him on the air, and he's graciously agreed to join me. So with all that to say, welcome to Secret Sonics, Alex.
Thanks, Ben. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. So tell me a little bit about yourself. We've been schmoozing a little bit, but I'd love to hear about your story, how music kind of began for you, and how it led you to what you're doing today, which is, mixing, producing, mastering even, mostly like hard, like metal and hard rock records.
Yeah. Well, to keep it somewhat brief, since it's a lot, but in a nutshell, I fell in love with music at a young age, and my parents introduced me to, they asked me to do piano lessons, so I started doing piano, and then I started getting into like classical pieces. But I learned through the Suzuki method, which is by ear, and then I slowly started to learn to read music, and then I discovered guitar, and I got a classical guitar, so I started playing classical pieces, attempting to, and I just got really nerdy into that, like getting, sheet music and learning all the different, trying to take classical piano songs that I was learning and then like transpose it to guitar and learn it on guitar, which is extremely, very, very challenging.
I'm sure.
So yeah, and
there's a lot more octaves on that piano, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I got really into it, and then I discovered once I started classical guitar, I discovered electric guitar, and then I started discovering bands like with heavier distorted guitars. Like the first ones was like Green Day and Blink-182. It started with like kind of punk stuff, and then one day I discovered Korn, and it all changed dramatically from that point on. Then I discovered like the low, crazy sounding fuzz, like low tune guitars.
Yeah.
And at that time when I first heard, it was the self-titled Korn album, because they were tuned to, I believe that was 1994 when that came out, but they were tuned to drop A on 7-string guitars, and like I had heard nothing like that ever before. So I was like immediately wanting to get a 7-string guitar, so I saved up and got one. And then I started to discover bands like Fear Factory and Cradle of Filth and Cold Chamber, all these like really heavy guitar-driven bands. And I guess a lot of it was like during the nu metal boom phase. And I also discovered from nu metal like more heavier stuff like death metal, black metal, industrial metal, all that kind of stuff. And that so I started playing in bands. This was before the internet, like right when the internet was starting, like with AOL, but I was getting my friends together, and we would start like garage bands and stuff and just, get really into it. And that started, and we played a couple shows like when I was in high school, and then I decided to try and get into music school. So I applied for Musicians Institute, and I went straight there right after I graduated high school. And then I met people there, learned about, guitar theory and jazz and all that stuff, got really, really submerged into it. And then I discovered, I met somebody who owned a studio, in the band I was in at the time. We went ahead and recorded with him, and I just fell in love with the recording process and audio engineering. And then I decided to try a course at MI for audio engineering. And I just fell in love with that, and I was able to take like my music skills into audio engineering, which is like a big plus, because there are audio engineers and producers that don't know how to play instruments, if you would believe that, which is weird to me.
Me too.
So I took all that experience into engineering, and then I decided like this is what I absolutely love, and I just ran with it. And like the first goal was like, I want to be in a famous band and tour and do all that. And then I just slowly over time I realized, what, like my personality is more like I like to have my home base. And I realized like even though I haven't been on a major tour, I just already knew from like doing like one-off shows and like traveling for stuff, I was like, you know what, I don't really like doing this. I like having my home base and making music and not living in so much chaos. So I
Yeah.
decided like this is exactly what I was meant to do. So just kind of ran with it from there and started my own studio. That the location has changed over time, but I just really decided to go all in with meeting bands, producing. It started with like a lot of just tracking vocals. Then I started doing mixing, mastering, production, and now I'm mainly focused on mixing and mastering. Although I'll do here and there, like if there's bands I've been working with for years that I will that I still engineer and produce. But I'm trying to focus more in on the mixing and mastering right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of everything in a nutshell.
Amazing. Well, you mentioned that you're. I mean, you didn't mention this, but I know that your studio is based out of the Sound City complex. How big is your space? What are you able to do inside of your space? What does that look like? What does the studio?
It's pretty
entail?
small. Like, yeah, it's a pretty small space. I have my control room where I do all the mixing and mastering, of course, and I have another room where I do vocal. If I need to track vocals, I'll do it in here, or if I need to track guitars, I got some cabs mic'd up. I can do pretty much everything besides drums. And although I have tried to do drums in here before, and it's worked, but it's not ideal because it's pretty crammed and it's like the lounge like booth area. But I have done it before. But yeah. When I do need to track drums, I have a few other go-to studios for that. But pretty much everything I can do here besides drums.
Yeah, the overdub process and the
Yeah.
everything else. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Did you have like any mentors, anybody that kind of helped you along the way when you were getting started to kind of like, I don't know, guide you in the right direction, or was it all kind of like the DIY method?
It was a lot of DIY. I did end up meeting people in the industry just over time. I met someone named Chris Collier, who he's a big rock and metal producer now, and he just did he just produced the newest Korn album, and he's helped me along, over the past 10 years. Like, we've actually, we've worked together here and there. He's hired me, I've hired him for projects, and we just keep in touch, and he's really helped me just with certain aspects of mixing and mastering, and also just people skills and whatnot. So he's one of them. Also, I had a buddy. He passed away earlier this year, but his name was Mike Wells, a mastering engineer.
Yeah,
and,
I've heard good, amazing things about him.
Yeah, he was a good friend of mine, and I learned a lot from him. Not as much about mastering, because we talked about it, but what I did learn a lot from him was about just like being grateful and he was really great with people, and just more of like the social part of the job in the industry. And
Right.
Yeah, actually I met him the same day I met Dr. Ford. We met at there's an event in LA the place is called Pro Audio LA, and when there's like this mixer event that they held, and I met Dr. Ford and Mike there on the same day, and we all just stayed in touch from then on. But Mike Wells was a big mentor and inspiration. Like, whether he realized it or not, like, he was definitely a mentor for me.
Yeah. I remember Dr. Ford also mentioning when I interviewed him about him, and I know Matt Boudreau, also from Working Class Audio, was friends and tight with him, and so I'm sorry about your loss. It seems like the industry is missing an important person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess shifting to happier things. Let's talk about how artists find you. How does work come your way these days usually?
It's still a mystery to me, because there'll be months where, I'm sure as you can relate to this, I think every audio engineer, every producer, mixer, mastering engineer can relate to this. Like, there's some months where I'm just like overwhelmed with inquiries and work, and then there's some months where it's like ghost town. And there's like, I understand the industry has its, there's the time when bands are touring and whatnot, and like the holiday season where people aren't working as much. But sometimes, like, some years it's really random, some years it's like pretty steady. Like, to expect a dry month is pretty consistent every year. Like, December is often pretty dry for me.
Mm-hmm.
June and July, just like, so I'm anticipating this already, but I'm not really sure. It's like I think it's mostly word of mouth, but sometimes I'll get random inquiries just through social media. I guess it's mainly from the more work you do, the more your name is out there and the more people see your work
Yeah.
and they might like something you've done. So they get in touch with you. But honestly, it's still a mystery to me. I'm not really sure. And it's like, it's kind of frustrating to figure out, okay, what's the best way to, cause when you have those dry months, you're like, okay, what do
Right.
I need to do to get some work going here? And it's like, I don't really know. I just have to kind of sit back and hope for the best sometimes, because I'm kind of torn between, like, there's some people that say, no, you need to just cold email people and, like, obviously don't be a dick, but you need to, like, you need to show people that you exist and show them your work. And at the same time, like, then I think about, cause I'll get engineers and other engineers, mixers and producers, mastering people that they'll just spam me with, like, messages like, if you ever need this, blah, blah, blah. If you ever need, and it's just like, sometimes it's just too much. And it's like, I don't want to be one of those people. So I
Right.
often think, like, I don't want to, unless, like, something gets really desperate, then maybe, like, if a month is really bad or, like, I'm really needing work, then maybe I'm will put that out there. But I tried not to, like, I try to just keep it, most of the time the work just comes in at the very last minute, like right before I need to, make a serious decision on what to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You have those last minute Hail Marys. They come through.
hmm
Yeah, it's interesting that this whole like discussion of like work and where it comes from and the seasons of the famine and the feast, and like sometimes like
Yeah.
when you're feasting, it's like, let's just get through this feast period so that I could be done with it. But then
Right.
that is too dry afterwards. And
Yeah. It can be very scary, because, like, the
yeah,
months I've learned, like, the months where things are going really well, I'm like, okay, well, I still, like, I'm very conservative with, like, finances, because I'm always thinking ahead, like, there's going to be a month in the future where things are going to suck. So you need to save for that. So I'm like, I try to be very smart about finances.
yeah, no, that's good, man. Me too. Gotta don't take too many chances with your revenue. But yeah, I feel like I mean, from what I've talked to some people, it seems like it's a good idea to kind of just always be planting seeds and like doing outreach like all the time, especially when you're busy, so that when you're not busy, you're still busy.
Yeah.
But it's so hard to stay focused on all those things at once, right? It's like we work so hard to be like great engineers or producers. Like nobody told us we had to be marketers, but we do, and it's rough. It's a hard balance,
hmm
especially if it's not
Or,
like
yeah, no one
intuitive
told
for
us
you.
we had to be marketing experts or psychologists or content creators or YouTube
Exactly.
algorithm experts or Instagram algorithm experts. Like, all this stuff, this is just like, like they say, every year the industry changes and the expectations change. So now it's like,
Yeah.
it's just trying to keep up with, what the expectations are in the industry. And it's really hard. I mean, not only is
Hmm.
what we're actually doing hard, but to let people know about what we are doing in the most, in the nicest way possible, and then
Yeah.
the least, like, intrusive way possible. That technique is like a whole nother job on its own, in my opinion.
Yes. Yeah. It
So,
really is. I mean, like, I'm listen. Like I'm podcasting, right? Like, so this is in a sense, this is some of I guess the content that I'm putting out for people to kind
mhm.
of become aware of me. That's not the entire point, and it's certainly not the best part about it at all at this point. But yeah, I'm just constantly putting out good content, good value for people, and it's just I don't know. It's like it's a part time job, right? Like it's part of my job. It's
Yeah, but I think what you're doing, I think podcasting is a fantastic way of, you know, not only are you putting yourself out there, but you're, making the world aware of other great creative
right,
professionals. It's just all around a great way to market yourself and market your colleagues and just
right.
the industry in general. Yeah.
It's not entirely self centered.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is nice about it.
Yeah, and it's just super, educational for, your guests, yourself, and then everyone listening. So it's just a win-win in my eyes. Like, I think it's the best
Yeah,
option these days, especially
I
for,
I appreciate that.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
but now I'm making content for my content, right? Like now I'm making all these like Instagram reels or whatever so that people discover the podcast, and it's like
Yeah.
slowly helping, but it's so much more work, you know? It's like,
Yeah, I guess you just had on, I think it was this week. I forgot the guy's
Steven?
name. Yeah, the conversation you guys had was great because it's just like what we're talking about now. It's so true, like you have to, it's just never ending because it's like, okay, well, and that's the thing. It's like the platforms change, the way you advertise on there changes, it's just a constantly keeping up
Right.
with what is the latest, best way to get the most engagement. Like now, I don't know if you noticed, but I think today or the day before, like Instagram, they changed their videos. Like now there's no videos. Like every time you post a video, it just goes to a reel. So now it's just reels.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
And I guess it's better for the algorithm because I am noticing the views and the engagement is way better when you do a reel. But now
For sure.
it's only reels. So just like keeping up with this crap is just so like, it's not that I don't hate it. It's just like, wait, I'm supposed to be making music here, and now I'm like finding myself spending hours, like figuring out these apps and shit, and it's just like, god damn.
I know. It's so loaded. It's because it's like like you said earlier, right? Like if somebody hears something that you did, that's the best way that they're gonna want to hire you to work with them, right? And work on their music. And so it's like the best thing you can do really is to make more music, right? That's the best thing you can do for your career is to make more music.
Right.
But then we get caught up in all this stuff, and it is important. And it's just like, it's like almost like a chicken or egg kind of situation. Like, do you do more, music work to get more music work, or do you do more marketing work, or like how much of both? Like, I don't know. Like but you need to start somewhere. Like if you're working in a vacuum, then nobody will find out about you. So it's
right. That's another thing I was going to say is like you can produce and mix and master records, all month long, all year. But if it's with artists that aren't getting any eyes, it's like it's really hard to have a break or to get noticed by the next artist. Like that's the thing. It's like you have to be, I think when you're first starting out, you need to do as much as you can, but there gets to a certain point where it's like, is this project really worth taking on? Like, especially if the artist is like really lowballing you, or if it's like a really low budget and like, okay, this band, they just started, they have no following, there's no numbers. Like this, the probability of, a lot of people seeing this is very, very, very low. Like, maybe they could, miraculously have a break, but just taking, I'm trying to be smarter about like, look, I want to work on music that I like, regardless if the band is popular or not, or they have the numbers or not. Like, I really don't care about that. But there comes a certain point where it's like, is it worth the investment in the time? It's about the time. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Is this going to be worth it? And it's not always, most of the time, it's not even about the money. It's about, okay, well, is this going to be heard by anyone, by people that care? You know what I mean? Is this going to even be heard? So that's just another thing I like to just try to be more aware of that,
Yeah. That's true, because sometimes like the best stuff you work on doesn't get heard by anybody, and that's so sad.
I mean, honestly, like a lot of the work that I'm most proud of in the past maybe like 10 years of my career, a lot of the work I'm the most proud of, I thought like that was a really cool, weird, like eccentric record. Like it's they release it, the artist releases it, and then maybe they'll get some views, and then just disappears, and like to never, it just goes into the void. You know what I mean? It's like, well, goddamn, it's just really hard. It's really hard.
It's so hard because I feel like artists become so attached to songs. Like they become so attached to this thing, and it becomes like a passion project for them, and it's like almost more important to get the song out there than it is for them to become like an artist. You know what I mean? It's like, and it's really problematic. I mean, if they, again, like, it's also fair to put out a piece of art because you just want to put out a piece of art, and like it's fair if you're hiring somebody to work on your art and that's it, and you just want to put it out there and then be done, and you have this for your for to show your grandkids and stuff. Like that's fair. Like that's totally fair. But like you said,
absolutely,
it's about the intention too, because there's nothing wrong with setting up the expectation of this project. Like, okay, this album is like a passion project. We don't really care about the numbers. We just want to finish it and put it out into the world, and whatever happens, happens. Like, I get that. You know, I've done a lot of projects like that where it's not about, you know, a big press release and trying to make it big and all that. It's just about, look, we love this. We love these. We love these songs. We love this music, and you know, it's our first album, or it's whatever. It's our third album, whatever. But I totally get that, because, you know, I've done projects like that. So it's about the expectations up front too. And it's like, if the goal is, okay, well, we hired a publicist and we're doing a music video and we want to get on all these playlists and XYZ, then it's like, okay, well, then we need to, you know, prepare for that and make sure that everything is optimized for that. So yeah, like, it's really about, you know, setting the expectations up front. And I think a lot of the times, unfortunately, that isn't talked about in like the initial meeting. It's just like, okay, you want to record an album, cool. Like, when do you want to start or whatever? It's like, so yeah, I think the setting up the expectations is a big deal for sure.
Yeah, I try to meet with like the artists that I'm potentially working with, like in the studio, like ideally, or at the very least, like have like a call, and it's usually like a 30-minute phone call of like talking about what they're trying to actually do with, you know, their music, and like, you know, what can I do, and is this helpful? Like, I think it's so important to get everything out front. And yeah, like, I think you kind of like hinted at it. It's like, if they're not going to work hard on like promoting it, then maybe then you won't take a low ball number. You'll just take a premium number.
Right. I mean, yeah, at this point, it's like, you know, we've been doing it for a long time. It's like we put in our early years, and it's like, at this point, I'm just kind of interested in working on, you know, with artists that are very passionate about the music. And like I said, it can start out just as a passion project. And as long as everyone is aware of that, and it's not about the PR and the numbers and the, you know, big exposure, then cool. Let's make like a fun, you know, project, and let's make a fun, weird album, and just have it be really artsy and enjoy the process,
right,
and make it sound great and put it out. But if it's like, okay, no, we expect your work to be so great, and you need to really, you know, this needs to be the best thing you've ever done so that we get, you know, huge hits. It's like, okay, well, I don't know if you've had potential clients like talk about what they expect from you, like up front. Like, okay, like I've had this before. Well, people are like, it's their first record and they're like super new, and they're like, okay, well, we want to hire you, and just let us know what your rate is and when you can start, but we want to make sure that this is the best thing you've ever done. Like, and they'll just keep going on and on and on. It's like, look, sure, I want it to be great as well, but if that's like what you're saying right out of the gate, and you've been a band for like a month, it's like, that's a big red flag to me. You know?
Yeah. I find that the artists that are the most pedantic about like, and being perfectionistic about every moment just from the get-go, they don't even usually release that music. You know what I mean? If they're asking you to change tempos like 4 times, then it's probably not even going to come to fruition. Like I had one artist where like literally like, it's like, oh, the tempo's wrong, like maybe three or four times. And at a certain point I was like, dude, like at this point, like with the rate I quoted you, if I keep working, I'm going to work minimum, you know, wage. And like, you know, like it's time, you know, I don't think this person has yet to put that song out, and this was like maybe 5 years ago or something, you know. So it's like this is what happens, you know. But it usually, like, I don't know. I feel like if the artist has the right intentions, then it's easier for the producer to kind of work with them. I don't know. Like I feel like like the red flag thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a big part of like that initial meeting too. Is like, do I vibe with this? Do I vibe with the band? Are we on the same page, not only musically, but like, are the goals the same or similar? Like, are we all understanding of each other and what the expectations are, and is everything realistic, and is it achievable? Like that's huge, you know?
Yeah, totally. So these days you're kind of shifting over to the mixing and mastering space. I noticed on a lot of your credits, you're credited as mixing and mastering. How are you able to do both? What does that look like for you?
You know what? It started as more of, well, the artist. It started like, oh well, we could barely afford what we paid you for mixing, so can you just master it too? And
right.
I'm like, okay. well, it's a budget thing. And then I started really realizing, well, I actually like doing both. If I, especially if I recorded it, because then it's just like it makes it easier to set up each stage of the process, and I know what to anticipate to make each stage the best it can be.
Yeah.
But it's really common in metal, like a lot of these big name guys. It's also like they're producing, mixing and mastering, or they're mixing and mastering these big records because it's kind of like baked in now. It's kind of expected. The artists just kind of come to the producer or the mixer and they're like, okay, they just expect them to master it. A lot of these guys, it's like, it's just kind of the new norm.
That's interesting.
Like a big guy is Andy Sneap. He's a very famous metal producer, mixing, mastering engineer, and guitarist. But a lot of the stuff he mixes and masters. A lot of the big name guys, like the top 10% of these guys are like producing, mixing, and mastering, or mixing and mastering. It's like
a
very, very
metal
common.
cultural thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think that's to the music's benefit?
I do if it's the right person for if the music and the artist and the producer have the same goal in mind, then yes. There are times where it isn't. Especially like if the artist is expecting something to be, this is a big thing, is like sometimes the artist will expect the mix and master to sound like X band because they told the producer up front, okay, here's our reference. We want to sound like the last Slipknot record or whatever. And just because you're an artist and you tell your producer that you want to sound like this band, in absolutely no way does that mean that is that even possible? Because first of all, it's you're yourself, and that's Slipknot. Like, there's no way to like even like, it blows my mind that that's even a thought. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you can send me a reference, but that doesn't mean it's going to sound anything like Slipknot. It's like, first of all, you don't even sound like Slipknot. Yeah, you're metal, but you're your own thing. It's like, I wish more artists would just
embrace who they are.
Embrace who they are and be like, look, the producer, just let the mixer do his thing. You hired him for a reason. If you want the vocal louder, no problem. If you want the kick drum louder, no problem. Easy. But if after he does his thing, if you all of a sudden go, oh, well, you know what? I don't really like my guitar tone. I was hoping it to sound more like this person, when all they sent you were DIs. It's like, you didn't even commit to, you don't even have your own artistic sound as a guitarist, and you're expecting the mixer to make you sound like whoever. It can be really frustrating. But I'm sorry, I'm kind of going on a tangent here.
No, it's okay.
Yeah,
it's a rant.
Sorry, yeah.
It sounds like this has happened once or twice.
Oh, dude, a lot. But yeah, I mean, it's very common in metal for the mixer to also master.
People wear different hats. Do people hire out for mixing and mastering a lot? Is that or like you kind of said, like a lot of people do everything in one house? Like, what is that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, and I know a lot of other guys in the metal scene that are producing, mixing, and mastering as well. Like, it's a lot of the time the artists, wherever they are in the world, they'll track at home, or they'll go to a studio, get their tones, and then they'll send out the multi-tracks to be mixed and mastered, or just mixed and then sent off to a specialized mastering engineer. I mean, it's really all over the place, but I'm just trying to express that it's very common in metal, like, for the mixer to also master, and there's really the
lines are blurred
to no detriment, really. Like, it's a lot of these guys are doing great work, and I wouldn't say it would be better if the mixer just mixed and sent it out to someone else to master, because often what we're doing in the mixing phase is we're mixing, but with mastering in mind. So once we, like, for example, if you were to take all of your master processing off of, say you have a final mix, it's a metal mix, it's like, it sounds great, the artist loves it, it sounds great on streaming. If you were to take the mastering chain off and listen to how that mix, it would be all over the place balance wise, because we're compensating in the mix for to get the master to where we want it, so that once it's at that certain LUFS level, once it's at whatever sounds good, -10, -9, whatever, it's the kick and the snare is punching where we want it. It's hitting where we want it. Everything is hitting where we want it. But if we were to take all those plugins off or hardware off, the mix would be not how we would balance it if we were just mixing it, if that makes sense.
Right, yeah. It's like the mix bus, when you're mixing into the mix bus, like, it affects everything, every move you do, right? Like people that do like top-down mixing, right, that start with the stereo bus compression or whatever, and maybe like, EQ, they're mixing into that. So when you take it off, everything falls apart. There are some people that mix the other way around from the ground up, and then it's not as important.
Necessarily the mix falls apart. It just needs to be rebalanced a little bit. Like especially the drums and guitars, like things just need to be, like basically the drums need to be tamed a little bit, because the transits be like really poking out when you take the mastering processing off of the mix. So like I remember your guest last week, he was talking about how he does the opposite. Like he's more about the he doesn't put anything
Josh
on.
Bonanno.
He's more like a purist of like traditional mixing, which is great too. I mean I think it's also very genre dependent. Like I wouldn't do that if I was mixing a pop song or mixing, something else. Like that's like a very specific like to metal technique, I would say.
Yeah. No, I get it, because you're trying to push things loud, and like how the kick and the snare and the bass are hitting that stereo bus thing.
Right.
And then you adjust
often,
the whole chain.
Yeah. What happens is, say you send it out to, it's a heavy rock metal mix, and you send it out to Chris Loraugi and he mixes it. It sounds awesome. And then you send it out to be mastered by, say, Ted Jensen, and who is amazing. And it gets to, he does his thing, or whoever's mastering it, they do their thing, and it's not like to the loudness level that the client may want. So to the detriment of the way the transients are sitting, to the way the drums are punching, if the mastering engineer makes it louder, like to please the artist, what happens is a lot of those snares will go away. You know what I mean? A lot of the kicks and snares would kind of get squashed in a little bit, and it won't be as punchy.
It's so crazy. That's so crazy. That it's so crazy that like the pursuit of loudness makes mastering inside the mix better than sending out to a dedicated mastering engineer for some genres.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, it's not always the case, but that is just what I've realized. Sometimes you have to do things a little bit more extreme, because it's an extreme sound. It's an extreme genre. Like a lot of these artists, they expect it to be a certain loudness, and if it's not as loud as whatever they're listening to right now, then they think there's a problem or something is wrong. And unfortunately, that's just how it is. Like, obviously, that's not the case, but that's just the reality.
Yeah, I just had that just gave me that revelation of like maybe the Death Magnetic record that Andrew Sheps famously mixed really, really loud and got mastered to death, no pun intended, might have been better off if like it had been mixed and mastered at the same time.
I don't know. I mean, possibly. It just depends on, that's the thing. It depends on who's working on it and, how they're feeling that day. Like there's so much that goes into it, honestly, but I don't really think with metal, there's no right or wrong. It's like however the final mix sounds, if the artist loves it and the people love it, it does not matter how it was mixed, or if the mixer mastered it as well. Like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I feel like I love how you said it's just extreme. It's an extreme genre, and people looking for extreme methods maybe to get those. And I think metal fans are hardcore about their fanhood. So it's even if it's not the biggest audience, they're a very dedicated audience. So yeah, it's super cool. So if I don't mind, if it's okay, if I backtrack to Sound City, I'm just super enamored by the fact that you're working there. Like, I mean, obviously I saw the Dave Grohl documentary. I'm assuming it's the same place, right?
Yeah, like it's called the Sound City Complex, and when you drive in, there's like the main courtyard, the main area where the main Sound City Studios was, which is now rented out by I'm not sure if I think it's a record label, but they do a bunch of high profile bands now, but I think the last the last artist I knew that was in there was they were doing like Killer's live record in there. But yeah, it's like the main building, and then across from that there are other studios. Like it's all different studios, and some are project studios, some are full blown studios. Across from the main Sound City building is my friend Matt Wallace. He has his studio there, and next to him is another friend of mine. His name's Shelby. They have their production company is called The Fund. But so there's studios all in the complex. Across from me is No Town Sound. Next to me is Boom Bap Recording Studios, which is like hip hop and rap. And then I'm like in the corner doing my, extreme metal stuff.
Yeah.
Like I'm the outlier here. But
the
yeah,
black
man,
sheep of the but
it's a great community because we all kind of talk, and we'll go out to lunch here and there, and you're like, it's awesome because it's so inspiring, not only because of the history of Sound City, but like every day when I come to work, I'm just like, holy shit, like I can't believe I'm here. Like, and some days I'll kind of, I'll be distracted by whatever I'm working on, and I kind of I'll forget about it. But yeah, like every once in a while, I'll just be like, wow, I'm really grateful to be here just because of the history and,
yeah,
as you can, yeah.
That's awesome, dude. And is your actual studio in like part of the actual same building that legendary Sound City was in, or is it like it's in like across the hall, so to speak?
It's across the parking lot because like it's a complex. So like the first when you drive in, there's like this whole 2-story building of studios, and Sound City is its own separate building, but it's basically like just right across the parking lot.
That's great. Yeah. I love that. I love that it came back and it became a whole community. It's bigger than it was. In a sense, it's bigger than it was because now there's so many studios there. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so bringing it back to kind of like mixing and metal and all that stuff. So I know like I've interviewed metal guys that do crazy drum recording techniques, crazy guitar recording techniques. Do you do anything that's like maybe extreme, so to speak, in terms of like your capture? Maybe, I don't know, maybe you like to talk about guitars because I know you're a guitarist.
Yeah. Well, personally, when I do a production, if I'm tracking and responsible for capturing the characteristic and tone of the artist, I like to, for metal guitars, like really heavy saturated guitars, it's nothing too crazy. It's just like I still like to use actual amps and cabs. I like to mic up a nice cab and get a nice tubed amp, like really cranked and saturated, and then I'll mic that up just straight on the cone with the 57. And what I like to do, especially if it's for like a bit slower, like doom metal stuff, or like it's really drawn out, open chords, lots of ringing out and sustaining. I'll just put like a random condenser like in the corner, like facing the corner, just to get a room sound, to get like that wishy-washy, like nasty, like ambience of the guitar in the room. So I like to do that and blend that underneath the 57 of the cab, and that's something I do pretty often. If it's something like a really, really fast metal where it's all about the pick attack and the transients and the intricacies, then I won't even bother throwing up a room mic. I just get straight.
Just one amp, one mic.
Yeah, one amp and one mic. I don't even do two, honestly, because most of the time I just end up putting, if I use like another condenser on the cab or a 421 or whatever, I'll be like, yeah, I'll do it just to be safe in case I need it, but I don't use it. I just, if I do, it's like super tucked underneath where the FM 57 is, and it's like, so a lot of the time if it's really fast metal, I'll just one mic it.
Is it like a phase thing, or is it it's just the right mic?
Yeah, it's just, well, for like I said, for like really fast intricate metal, if it's like technical, like the room tone is just irrelevant.
Right.
It's just about that nice tone and the fast attack of the string and getting that nice crunch. So yeah, I just don't even, if I know it's like the song is like pure fast, like pick attack stuff, I won't even use a room mic.
Yeah. And you're not into the amp sims on the computer, like the neural DSPs and all that stuff.
I have some of the neural DSP stuff, which I really like. I'll use it for if I'm doing like just songwriting, or I need to like throw something up really quick and get a tone fast, then I'll use, I really like the the Gojira one. I just got that, and I really love that one. It sounds great, and I actually really like the Dark Glass bass plugin. That is fantastic. So I'll use those. I really like those, but I'm still kind of a purist. Like, I still really like the just miking up a really nice head and cab, and just, it's still like, it's close. It's really close, but to me, it's like, it's not really there yet. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not really into the Kemper stuff. I understand why people like it for live and for in the studio, but yeah, if like I'm doing a record that is really important and matters, like obviously it's like, if it's a serious project, I'll just like to take the time and mic it up and get the tones and just spend that time up front.
Yeah. In terms of like drums, and I know you're kind of working the hybrid approach in terms of when you're tracking drums. How involved do you get in the actual engineering of drumming, or is it you kind of leave it to the engineer that you trust?
When I go, I use another studio in Burbank, California called ES Audio. Shout out to ES Audio and Donnie Baker. He's the manager over there. But I've been going there for years, and I'm very, very, like, I engineer the session with, like, I'm very, like, I want to be hands-on with every part of it if I'm producing it. So we'll go in there and we'll get the tones dialed in. I'll have Donnie help me, like, he'll patch everything up, and I'll decide, okay, do we want to compress the rooms heavily? Do we want to compress, just all those decisions. And yeah, I'll sit there, and I like to be hands-on with the artist while we're tracking drums, and I'll sit there and engineer on Pro Tools and whatnot. So I'm very hands-on. Like, there's only been a few situations where I haven't engineered my own productions.
Yeah. Do you defer like editing to somebody else? You do everything.
Sometimes, if the issue I've been running into lately is, like, honestly, I know, like, most of us, we don't like, that's the work that obviously no one wants to do, like the drum editing, the instrument editing.
For me, it's a bottleneck. It's like, it just slows down me finishing songs,
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, if I have to do it, like, honestly, like, I end up having to do like 70% of it, because a lot of the time that my go-to guys who are great at editing and vocal tuning, they're so busy or they don't have time. So I'm like, damn, like, either I wait 2 months or just do it myself. So I end up having to do it myself most of the time. But I've gotten pretty quick. Yeah, I gotten pretty quick at, like, I have my system down for drum editing. I have my system down for tuning. So I just kind of like suck it up, and I'm like, all right, just the next 2 hours, just gotta just plow through it and do it. So yeah, I'll most of the time I'll have to do my own editing.
Right.
So
yeah. I remember I spoke to this one guy, Ed Boyer, who worked on a lot of Grammy-winning a cappella music, totally different genre. But he told me, he's like, I either am really excited to work on the music, or I'm really excited to get the work over with. So better to just kind of like, do this with your fingernails and what is it called? Like, crunch.
You're totally right though when you said it's like a bottleneck, because for me, the problem I have with when I know I have to edit, especially like if a lot of editing needs to be done, like, it is kind of a buzzkill on the flow of the project, because a lot of the time the editing and tuning, especially if it's for like a 4-song EP or a full album, it takes longer than anything else. It takes longer than the recording. It takes longer than the mixing. It's like, it consumes the most of the time with the project. Like, if, at least for me, because if it's a heavy, if the song needs heavy drum editing and tuning and, bass and guitar editing, even, that's like, at least to really like do it thoroughly and to make sure there's no, mess ups with the beat detective and the fades, to really do it thoroughly, it's at least 2 to 3 hours for me, like, to really get in there and make sure it's all good. Because you can do the beat detective, but I find that I just do it in sections because it isn't perfect, and you have to go through and check and make sure it's not. And sometimes it'll do crossfades in weird spots. It's not completely accurate, so you got to go through and recheck it anyway. So it's kind of a buzzkill on the project for me, but it's just one of those things you gotta just suck up and do. And
I know you have to be thorough. There's no shortcuts in terms of that. And so, like, these things that take time just inevitably like, there's only so much you can systematize it. And and at the end of the day, sometimes you just have to do the manual labor, right? Like,
Yep.
yeah, and suck it up. And that's it's a bummer because that could really, yeah. I'm curious about how you take projects on in terms of like, what does your calendar look like? Because I know like a lot of people that work with bands, they'll take a week or 2 weeks with the band and kind of work on a project and then wrap up and then move on to the next one. And I'm kind of like working on like 15 things at once, where I'll have like a session a week with an artist if I'm working on a production and slowly chugging away at mixes and stuff. Like what does your calendar look like?
It's all over the place because the reality is, unless you're only working with one artist, there's no way to only work with that one artist. You know what I mean? It's like you have to, if you're tracking an album, but the artist wants to separate the sessions like into, and so a lot of the time it's like, oh, well, we can only track on the weekend because of their, work. So it's like, okay, we got to do drums one weekend, then the next weekend it's guitar and bass, the next weekend it's vocals. So during those 3 weeks, there's no way I'm only going to be working on one artist unless that's all I have, but most of the case it isn't. So it's like, it's constantly juggling different projects and different, it's just like I have to make a calendar every month. It's like, okay, Monday is tracking for so-and-so, Tuesday is edits for so-and-so, and it's just, it's all over the place.
Yeah,
you
keep track. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Gots to.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, amazing. In terms of mixing metal, like what does that look like for you? Like, are you in the box? What do you have mix templates? What does that stuff look like?
I'm 90% in the box. I've been using the SSL Fusion a lot for my mastering. That's the only outboard gear I will use. But I'm mostly in the box, and I find that the Fusion really it adds that analog 3D dimensional weight. So it really, really helps, and I'm really enjoying using that. But yeah, I'm mainly in the box. And what was the other question? Sorry.
I guess templates.
Oh, right.
You could even talk about methods or anything that you think about when you're starting a mix.
Templates. I'm not super crazy about them. Like, I'm not doing what Billy Decker does. I don't know if you've read. Have you read his book?
I haven't read his book, but I've heard him on a few interviews. Actually, yeah, I've been meaning. I actually reached out to him. Hopefully, I'll have him on the show sometime. Yeah,
you got to get him on because the way he explains it is just so fascinating. But the second he announced he was writing this book, I just immediately pre-ordered it on Amazon because I was just so fascinated with the way the mindset. Me, mixing a song in an hour before I started doing templates and whatnot and understanding this kind of system, I was like, that sounds crazy to me because it's especially, does that include session prep and editing and it can't possibly include all that. So I was like, the fact that he does a mix in an hour just blew my mind. But then after I read his book, I was like, okay, so he has someone else prep, he has someone take care of all that stuff, and then he drags the files into his template and then he tweaks. So it makes sense, but I don't get that crazy. I don't have, my template isn't for every single track in the session. My template is basically my effects and my buses and my mix and master chain. So I'll load that up, then I'll route everything. And then I'll have maybe a few things that I'll always use on kicks and snares and whatnot that I'll just have deactive. But it's kind of half of what Billy Decker does. So I'll always import my routing, basically my routing and my buses. So that goes pretty quick, but I do find that it really speeds things up, and it's a great way to work. And it's not, in absolutely no way does it mean that every mix you do is going to sound the same. That's ridiculous. It's just, it's your routing and it's your busing, and it just depends on what it's obviously so dependent on what is being delivered to you,
Yeah. Well, it's the source. Like you said, the source material is everything. Yeah, and let me think about where else I want to take this. Just give me a second. Yeah. So I mean, I guess in terms of besides from the template, what's the first thing you do when if you're mixing a song, let's say that you didn't produce, is it you just kind of follow your intuition? Do you listen to roughs? Like I don't even know what it's like in metal. Like I don't know. Like I don't know what that looks like in your genre. Like what how does it begin?
Yeah, well, first things I do is I get the files, I download them from the artists, and depending on how they're delivered, sometimes it's just they'll just be wave multi-track consolidated waves that I'll import in and hope and pray that they're labeled. And if they're not labeled, then I'll go through and make sure I basically just prep the session, and that can take, depending on how well it's delivered, that can take, a few minutes to like a few hours. So if it's a big prep, then I'll just prep that day and I'll mix it a different day, because after having to like sift through someone's files and figure out what's what, and then clip gain, because sometimes like a vocal region will be like super fucking gained up, and then like kicks and snares will be super gained down. So just like going through and evening everything out, clip gain wise, labeling. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of prep. Sometimes I'll get sessions that are done that are Pro Tool sessions and they come in great. So I just kind of pick up where they left off. But I do find that I do a lot of clip gaining and kind of just import my buses and my template. And so I'll just start with drums, make sure the drums are there. I'll bring in the guitars, bring in the bass, bring in vocals. If there's synths, take care of that. But I kind of just, it's pretty traditional how I mix it. Just like, everyone else, start with drums, then the guitars, bass, vocals. So it's nothing super crazy, but yeah, it really just depends on how it's delivered. So I always hope that, and I try to like, I made a video for clients, like how to prep and consolidate your multi-tracks for your mix engineer. So I made a full video about that. So if like anyone is unsure, I'll just send them that video, because it comes up a lot, especially for new bands. So I just try to make sure that it comes in the most organized way possible.
Yeah, it's so important, the organization. Like I discover a lot just when I'm setting up a mix, when I'm just kind of putting things into my template, which is also mostly routing, and just kind of like, oh, this sounds like that, cool. Like you kind of discover the song as you kind of put it together. That seems to be the case for me, at least. Yeah, in terms of like vocals, like metal vocals, they could be so weird in terms of like tonality. Like, I don't know, walk us through like I don't know, maybe the craziest vocal tone that you've done. Like what would the processing be like in such a situation?
Well, if I'm producing, like I like to track going into Pro Tools with pretty heavy compression, because the reality is, it's going to get compressed again and again. So I just like to hear it going in like kind of pre-baked. And I recognize too, like the artists, when they're tracking, they kind of prefer to hear it a little bit more compressed. So like they're not having to project as much. So I'll compress with use the Purple Audio MC77, the 1176 version. I'll just compress through my Avitas MA5 into the 1176. Usually for metal, it's SM7 is great. So I use that 99% of the time. And that's like the chain, and it works great. So get that going in, a nice like fat waveform. And then during mixing, there's a plugin that I absolutely love for metal vocals. It's called Gain Reduction by Joey Sturgis Tones. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
I've heard of Joey Sturgis Tones, but I haven't heard of Gain Reduction.
It's like you slap it on and it's pretty much done, because it's such an extremely like gritty, fast compressor, and it just brings the vocals so like aggressively up in your face. And I often like, it's too much. So then I bring it down, and then like once you bring it down and like EQ it a little bit, it just sits perfectly. Like I very rarely find myself having to do any vocal automation when I do that. Like that's always the goal, like, because let's face it, like with metal, there's not a lot of, unless it's like a melodic vocal, for the screaming parts of metal, there aren't a whole lot of dynamics. Yeah, there may be a little bit, but most of the time, like, it sits pretty much the same in the mix through the whole song. So it's just like, I like to really compress it heavily, and this plugin just adds this really awesome grit and bite. So I'll use that, and then I just kind of let it sit there. And if I need to automate it up, I will. If I need to bring it down, I will. But most of the time, it just sits very, very beautifully across the mix.
That's amazing. It's so interesting the way you say like the no automation thing for the vocal. I feel like with like a lot of mixers in a lot of different genres, automation is like what eats up a lot of time in terms of the mix. And it seems to me from like what you're saying and from also other people I've interviewed who work in the metal genre, it's like it seems like what takes up the most amount of time mixing metal is that puzzle of like getting everything to kind of punch through at the maximum volume, like that, or maximum apparent volume at least, you know, through all getting those transients to sort of come through, and the mastering chain and all that stuff. Like that seems to be where the magic is at in terms of like metal mixing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with pop, like with really dynamic melodic vocals where there's a lot of nuance and a lot of up and down in, you know, in dynamics, like of course then it's all about the automation and setting it and lifting that vocal just to the right place. And a lot of the time, if the performance is, even if it's compressed on the way in, if the performance is very dynamic and expressive and has a lot of emotion, then it's going to require a lot of automation to keep it like kind of beautifully up in front. And I mean, often, you know, with pop, like there's parts and verses where, you know, like Mariah Carey kind of stuff, for example, it's like it's really, really like dreamy and it's like that high frequency, but you know, the dynamics are there. So like automation is always needed, you know what I mean? So with metal, like the vocal is so extreme and it's always the same velocity and aggression, and like most of the time throughout the song. So it's actually really easy, in my opinion, to get a metal vocal like sitting where it needs to sit. Like you said, the hard part of mixing metal is getting all of the little individual pieces of the puzzle to fit up against that brick wall of a master. That's like, it's so hard. It's really hard. But that's, once you get the sweet spot and you figure it out and you do it enough, like it becomes kind of second nature. But that's the thing, like depending on what you're getting, the raw files, and depending on what is being delivered to you, that changes that whole process. So you might need to spend more time giving the drums where they need to be. You might need to spend more time with guitars. It just depends. But if you're lucky enough to get really great recorded files, then it goes pretty quick. So
yeah, that's cool. But going back to the vocal, kind of crazy vocal tones, you think like most of it's in the source, or are you strapping on like I don't know, I'm talking about like the throaty, like really crazy screams, like is there anything else that is done after the fact to kind of like help those things really feel bigger than life, or it's just about like the source and compression and EQ?
I think it's everything, because it's really important for the source, like the singer has to be great. Like I think a lot of the time people are kind of assume like, well, it's just a metal vocal, so just scream and do your best and it'll be fine. Like not necessarily. Like it, you might be able to hide behind a bunch of distortion and compression and whatever, but still at the end of the day, like you have to be good at what you do vocally. Like a great example of what you're asking about is there's a band called Lorna Shore. They're very popular right now in like the deathcore scene, but the vocalist has all kinds of different vocal styles. So he'll do like the really high pitch, like shrieking. He'll do like the extreme lows. He'll do mid range, like throat stuff in the middle. His vocal range is all over the place, but he delivers like it sounds almost exactly like the record when he's in there in the studio, like and live. So he's very good at what he does, but in the mix, there of course there's a lot of compression going on. There's distortion, there's saturation added to it, but it just further complements how great his tone is. It's like there isn't really like just slap this on and it'll be great thing. It's like more of just like with music in general, like every part of the process has to be great. You know what I mean? There's no way to get around it.
Yeah,
so,
I guess I'm thinking more in terms of like like I understand what you're saying, like in terms of like just like, you know, using the tools we have to enhance the source versus like I'm thinking about like I don't know, Phineas throwing Billie Eilish's voice through some crazy like warping effect or
Oh, okay.
but I guess it's
Yeah,
less
I
of
mean,
that. Yeah.
Well, with metal vocals, there's all kinds of shit you could do. Honestly, like there's great ways to you could throw like a freaking devil lock on it. Like I love saturation on brutal vocals. Like any kind of brutal vocal, it just brings out the grit, it actually brings up the volume. That's another thing I love about saturation. It's like it's also like devil lock is kind of like it's a distortion, but it's also feels like it's kind of like a limiter or like a clipper. It brings up the volume, like the apparent volume. And it just absolutely like throws it like on top of the mix. It just absolutely like pushes it through like a shark fin in the mix when you put a lot of saturation on something. So that's great for vocals. I find myself doing a lot of different kind of atmospheric reverbs to put it in a space, like to put it in like there's a track I just did that I sent you yesterday. For this band called Siglos, and the metal.
We'll
vocal
hear this in the
like,
sauce segment later on, people. So
yeah, like the metal vocal it's actually the vocal chain I explained earlier is exactly what I used on him, and I felt in the mix like it was already really powerful without any kind of delay and reverb, but adding a little bit of. I added like I believe it was like a chamber reverb or an arena reverb or something, just subtly underneath it, and then. I think I automated reverb. See, like I like to automate more effects and atmospheric things than the actual main vocal sometimes because it just creates a different, creates a different space, a different atmosphere, like during certain parts of the song, rather than just, okay, I turned the vocal up in the chorus, but that's all. It's like, well, if you just put it in a different space or shift the environment a little bit, that can be more of a jarring thing or more noticeable,
Interesting.
Yeah.
Effects are huge. Yeah, and also I find that Devil Lock is like that kind of perfect plugin to do something like if something needs a lift and you just aren't sure what else to do with it, try the Devil Lock. It's perfect for like
I love that one. Yeah.
For those random things. Okay, yeah, but so you've kind of walked us through like different ways you mix and approach, producing and mixing metal. Do you think that you do something that you could maybe call a trademark sound that people come to you specifically for, or is maybe your thing more of like being the right fit for whatever the song is and trying like blending to that song specifically? I guess chameleon would be the word. What do you think?
Yeah.
What would you say? And if so, if you do have a trademark sound, what would you say that is?
Yeah, I feel like I know what it is, but I'm still trying to figure out because to me it's more about what people see it as because you can't control obviously like you could try your best to be the most amazing pop vocal mixer ever, but no matter how hard you try at that, if there are other things you're doing maybe subconsciously like in every mix that is more noticeable to the audience than even to yourself, I feel like sometimes it's really hard you can't really control, like, in my opinion, what you're known for sometimes or how people are attracted to your work. So for me, I think I like to bring a really dark atmosphere to most of my work. Like I'm all about really huge, heavy guitars, and I like to use a lot of synths and orchestral scoring kind of sound design aspects wherever I can. And I like to make it larger than life, kind of like cinematic. I'm not afraid of throwing like risers, like every other snare or something, like just adding like all kinds of different cinematic things subtly underneath the mix, sometimes subtly, sometimes not so subtly. But I just like to create environments instead of just, okay, I mixed your track and didn't really add anything to it. Like I like to, as long as the artist is cool with it. There's been occasions where like maybe I felt like, okay, I'm going to add like a kind of like a haunting pad underneath this verse just to change it up because both verses are exactly the same. Like there is really no attempt by the person who recorded or wrote the song to like make either the verses different. So I was like, okay, well, let me try something here. Let me just do something to make this second verse sound different than the first. So sometimes I'll throw in some pads or some different kinds of synth sounds just to like spice it up a little bit. But there's been times it hasn't happened. It's only happened like a couple times, I would say, since I've started doing this in my career. But there was one time where I just added this like subtle kind of eerie synth to a verse, and because the first verse sounded exactly the same, so I was like, let me give this a shot. But the artist was like, "Hey, I noticed there's some weird like haunting like movie sound going on under the second verse, and yeah, I didn't add that. I don't know how that got there." I was like, okay, crap. So I just deleted it, or I muted it and sent it and did a different mix. But most of the time, the artist is like super excited about anything I might add to the mix.
Yeah, it's so cool. It's I've done it a few times where I've added a couple things, and like I feel like you have to know your audience, and you have to know like if they're not expecting it, maybe to warn them, or if sometimes they'll be pleasantly surprised if you have like a working relationship with them. I feel like it depends. Like yeah, but it's totally a move, and it gives you like that extra kind of like added value that you're providing to the artist. That
yeah, I would say that's a big part of what I like to bring to the table. Like not only like if you hire me to mix and master your song, the most likely I'm gonna be doing more than that. I'm gonna be adding some production things, and I think that's kind of become another thing with metal. Like that's almost expected now. It's almost like when someone hires you to mix or master, like a lot of these bands, they'll expect, oh, well, he's going to add sub drops. He's going to add whatever, like, you know, and for me, that's true because I love adding that stuff to the mix. But it just seems like too, like, you know, the roles, the production roles are kind of, you know, meshed together.
Yeah, it seems like all the lines are blurred in the work that you're doing, at least in the genre that you're working in. Like
I think in most genres too, because I think there's a lot of artists that I get this problem a lot. Like I just had a release a couple days ago, and sometimes there's just a misunderstanding. So it's like, you know, I engineered and produced the track and mastered it. We had it mixed by Tim Palmer, and I did a lot of the production and engineering. But like sometimes the artists will. And it's not like I get why they will mention the bigger known engineer, because Tim Palmer is like huge. I don't know if you know his work, but he's an absolute legend.
Yeah, I looked him up actually.
Yeah, but like the artists will sometimes they put like produced and mixed by Tim Palmer, when, you know, the artist and we actually produced it. You know what I mean? And we had Tim mix it. And it's like sometimes there's just misunderstanding about the roles and like what each part of the process means.
Yeah.
So it's like that's another big thing, is like communicating credits and all that. That's a whole other
I think the onus is on us to educate the artists that we work with about how different things are. And I feel like as I start to understand what mastering is more than I used to, like as a producer, me explaining that to the artist, I think is like super important education, right? Like, you know, somebody who doesn't master his own mixes, but like, yeah, it's like, I feel like the education part of the producer role is like underratedly super important. And, and I feel almost most like a producer when I do that. Like when I'm explaining to the band, like what mastering is bringing to the table, I feel like a producer, like all of a sudden, like even though I just mixed the song and it sounds great, like now I feel like a producer now that I'm explaining you how we're going to get to the finish line and what that looks like and what all these processes are and even though the lines are blurred, maybe.
I just think, like even there's some, it's just been over time, like the role of the producer has changed so much. Like since some people, like no matter how much it's explained, like there's some people that they always feel like the producer is just like someone who shows up and says, like sits on the couch and says, hey, maybe like switch up that verse and move the bridge a little bit, and then leaves, like like the old school kind of producer, right?
Yeah.
Someone that doesn't even touch Pro Tools or touch any gear. They're just there to like observe the project and whatnot. So some people consider that a producer. Some people consider a producer as someone who does everything from start to the end. Some people think a producer is just the person that fucking adds, that comes in and maybe just brings their opinion about arrangement and songwriting. Like it's all over the place. So like I do when I can, like I like to talk to artists, like, cause a lot of artists, they already have their, they've been doing it for so long. They already have their idea of what the roles are. And that's great. But yeah, sometimes it can get a little bit, blurred. So it's still a bit of a struggle, but like I think, like you said, as long as, if the conversation needs to come up, we can, explain and do our part as a producer to let the artist know,
Do you find like you're able to help these artists, try to prevent the artists that kind of just release something amazing and then disappear into the ethers? Like, do you find that you're helping them kind of figure out release strategies, anything like related to kind of like when you're done working on the song?
Actually, yeah. I mean, I just partnered up with a publicist. Her name is Raquel Figlo, and she's worked with quite a few of my artists now. Like a lot of my clients, I just refer people to her who might not be so sure about how to get a feature in, an online, like Metal Injection, or there's all these different sites and online places for releases and premieres and all that. And it's not so easy to get featured in that unless you know what you're doing. So I'll just, I refer a lot of my artists to her, and she's been great, and she's helped me with some of my personal music as well. But yeah, I do feel like when the occasion may rise, I like to, like, hey, you need help. What's your plan to promote this? What's your plan to get this out into the world? Like, oh, we don't really know. I'm like, okay, well, maybe you should talk to Raquel, just so I really want to help everyone I work with, and even people that I'm not working with, like, cause I'll get inquiries and I'll be like, hey, maybe I'm not the right person for this, but maybe so-and-so can help you. Or maybe if you need if you need a feature, like, go to Raquel. So I just want to help everybody, do the best work they can and put out the best music they can and have it actually be heard.
See the light of day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amen to that, man. It's so important. Also, like referrals are awesome. It's like so great. Like I love handing work off to somebody I know will take care of, whoever came to me, and that just builds trust between everybody, Yeah. And that's like so important also for community, like the other local guy that I can like send business to when I can't do it, or if he's a better fit than me, like that stuff is great.
Absolutely.
Big fan of that. Awesome. So I think this is a great opportunity to head over to the Sauce segment. And you already mentioned this song on the air called Morir para Vivir, which is by a band called Ciclos, which you talked about working on the vocal there. And so you sent me this song for the Sauce segment. So let's have a listen to this for about 90 seconds and we'll chat about it. Sound cool?
Sweet. Yeah.
Awesome. Woo. Man, that is something. Wow, that's really cool. I love how the energy shifts when you kind of were talking about shifting like ambiences or spaces, and like I noticed a few of those where like the energy totally shifts, and all of a sudden it sounds like you're in a different hall or different space, which was awesome. And there's some badass riffs. Really cool, man.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about this production. What went into it? I feel like the drums at the beginning were super challenging to mix.
Yeah. Well, this is the project of Sin Kieran. He's formerly the guitarist of Ministry, and this is his new band. We've been working on these songs for the past year and a half, almost 2 years now, and so this is his new project, and it features another friend of mine. His name is Pedro Sanchez. He's in another band from LA called Transtorno, but they came together for this. I had worked on Pedro's previous album with Transtorno, and Sin needed a vocalist for his new project, and they ended up gelling together really well. So they're working together on this project. So we decided he put out the first single back in March, I believe. And this is the second single with a video that just came out a couple of days ago. And it's compared to the first single. The first single is a little bit slower. It's a little bit doomier. This one is more kind of obviously it's more up tempo, more mechanical. Has that driving riff. Yeah, and that's in drop C. So that's it has a lot of constant riffage, so it's technically challenging because it's just like it requires a lot of endurance. But yeah, Sin wrote all the music, and Pedro wrote the lyrics and recorded the vocals. So we recorded everything here. Those are actually programmed drums. So yeah, the mixing was. See, what happens is when you work with great musicians and everyone's on the same page, and that's exactly what happened with this project. Like, because Sin and I, we really get each other like as artists, musically. Like we have very similar guitar techniques. So when we came together to write this song, especially, like it just clicked. And what happens is when you're recording with someone like that, like he's been playing guitar for so long, and he's like one of the best rhythm guitarists in the world, in my opinion.
Wow.
So we just gelled really well, and all the tracks when we recorded, since I was able to have control over production, it just came together really well. So the mixing, it wasn't necessarily super difficult because I did my best to make sure everything going in tracking wise was the best it could be. So the guitars we tracked here, I believe I used my Laney VH100R head into I believe I used my Mesa cab, and the bass on there is just DI, but that's with Dark Glass, the Neural DSP Dark Glass plugin, and a Sin track bass for that as well. And yeah, I mean the production came together really, really, really quickly, and I added a bunch. Like if you listen later in the song, there's like a French horn section that comes in, and I used oh God, what's the name of it? Majestica. It's this like really in-depth orchestral VST through Contact.
Huh.
And so yeah, I just went crazy on the layers of horns, and there's also some like church bells in there. And yeah, I just wanted to make it larger than life, like super cinematic, like almost horror movie. Like towards the end, like it just builds, and like yeah, when those horns come in, it just for me, every time like when I watch the video for the first time, like the section when those horns come in and the way that the video is edited, it just kind of like it gives you chills every time, because it's just like really intense, and like there's a lot of emotion that comes in at the end with those horns. But yeah, I'll send you the link to the video if you want to check it out.
Yeah, I saw
later,
a clip of it on Instagram, but I'll check out the whole thing now that you've told me about the symphonic element at the end. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, man, it wasn't super challenging mix wise, like I said, because we just took the time with the raw tracks. So I just I brought it up, I enhanced where I could, brought it up to level, just made sure everything was balanced pretty well. And I don't know if other people you spoke with who do rock and metal mentioned this before, but I like to do a lot of serial clipping. So on like kicks, snares, I'll do on the kick and the snare, the drum bus, and a little bit on the mix bus, but just like to do a series of light clipping so that once it reaches the mix and master bus, like it's more perceived loudness, and it's not necessarily like what I don't like about. I kind of shifted from doing serial limiting to serial clipping, because with limiting on individual instruments, like I'll do it on vocals, but I've noticed that I'm liking the sound of clipping a lot better on drums, especially. So I won't limit drums anymore, but I do clip them. And then vocals, I'll limit maybe a little bit on individual tracks, but it just seems to gradually build up so that once it hits the mix bus, and like I'm tapping my SSL comp a little bit, once it hits that, it's already like pretty slamming and loud, and it has that impact and intensity. And then once I get to the mastering chain, I don't need to do a lot of limiting. So what I find is when the mastering chain, I like to do one stage of clipping, just subtle clipping. Then I'll bring it into the Slate FGX, which is also a clipper, but I'll just do a little bit of clipping on that. And then I have my final limiter, but I'm not really pushing the input. Like I don't ever like really go past 1 dB of input gain on my limiter, because I don't like the limiter to go past -1 of gain reduction.
Mm-hmm.
So, and a lot of people when they do the mastering, they'll like to use their final limiter
To
kind
bring
of
up the volume.
aggressively.
Yeah.
Kind of aggressively, but I
Mhm.
like to do it in stages over time. So to me, it sounds less harsh. And
Yeah,
it sounds
it's like a
bit
less
more,
forced volume thing because you're doing
yeah.
the subtle things. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
awesome. I have not heard about what's it called, serial clipping. I'll have to try it. I
It's
don't
fun.
do a
It's
ton of
fun.
clipping for the kind of genres I work on, but I probably should experiment more with clipping.
Yeah, there's a great plugin for it.
Yeah.
Also by Joey Sturgis Tones
Yeah.
called the JST Clip, and
Mhm.
it's like $40, and it's great. And you just put like a couple, like, I mean, I think it goes up to, I can't remember the number it goes up to. If you just put it on like 2 or 3, it doesn't have to be crazy amount, but that subtle amount of clipping over time, it just really, it brings the perceived volume up in a very pleasing way. And if find like it's louder, but you're not eating up as much RMS. So it's really fun. And I like to do that with saturation too. So
Serial saturation.
mm-hmm.
Do you mix into? Do you have a saturator on your stereo bus / mastering chain?
Do I? I don't believe I do. I like to take care of that stuff within the mix. I find that I like to keep the mix and master chain somewhat clean from any like too much. Actually, well, sometimes I'll use the tape machine, the Slate the Slate tape machine for a little bit of that juice, that mojo it adds. And I guess that is a bit of saturation, but it's not nearly as much as something like a decapitator.
Yeah,
So,
of course.
yeah, but
Yeah,
so
I
like to keep it.
I don't know if you're hip to it, but the Plugin Alliance has this black box. I think it's the HG2.
Yes.
Dude.
I love that one.
I'm mixing into it, and I tried to, like, I don't know, after Josh's episode where he tells me he works from the ground up. I don't know that I almost 99% of the time mixing into the HG2 is just, it just adds that extra element of depth, and it just only adds good things to all the whole frequency spectrum. I don't know.
Yeah, I love that one. I just got that like a few months ago, and I've been experimenting with it. I did try it on the mix bus, but I think it's going to be a little bit of a learning curve for me to shift into using that. I do like it a lot on like drum bus, and I think I used it a little bit on like extra percussion stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not subtle. It's like super aggressive, but in a pleasing way. So
in a very pleasing way. Yeah. I mean, I blend it in. It's usually at like 30% or something even mixed, but it adds that like almost like an analog kind of dimension, I find.
Yeah, it sounds really nice.
Yeah, it's you know, I know it's interesting we talk about the clipping because I noticed like that mix was very punchy, even though it's very loud and aggressive. Like it still felt quite punchy, like the drums.
Thank you.
You know, so that's not easy to achieve. I feel like with given everything going into it.
Yeah, that's and like sometimes, like I said, when the tracks come in great and it's a great arrangement, and you know, sometimes it gets there without a lot of effort. Like it's just there because everything all the steps were done, you know, right from the get-go. But like sometimes it is a struggle to get it loud and still retain all of the depth in the drums and the punchiness and the dimension. So that's basically one of the hardest things with metal is just keeping it massive and allowing everything to have its place without things folding in on themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I did like a heavy rock mix. It was hard to kind of get everything to kind of like feel right. And I probably should be sending these things off to you maybe, but but I actually used it was like the Slate version of the OTT at the very end, and it just like fucking brought everything like that. Like it was like that missing element, kind of like we talked about, like the Devil Lock or whatever. And I was shocked at like how it kind of just brought out the guitars in like a really nice way, and kind of kept everything feeling like, I don't know, a little bit punchier, which was interesting.
Yeah,
So you never know.
I haven't messed with that one yet. I do have that I have the everything bundle, so I have it, but I haven't really dove into that plugin yet, but it looks pretty sick. Like I threw it on once, but I was just like, there's a lot going on, so I haven't really had a chance to learn it.
It's very
So do
intuitive. It's actually very intuitive.
Yeah.
You kind of just like, I just mess with like the sliders until things start to feel right. And then also blending it into taste. Like sometimes like 5% is all you need, you know?
Okay, cool.
That my experience, but like different people do use OTT and MOTT different ways. But anyway, that's just been my limited experience with it. But that was fun because it did bring out like that. It's hard, man. The metal, the hard rock thing. Not an easy genre to mix. So kudos on this track. Sounds great.
Thank you.
Yeah. I guess the other thing I wanted to ask you about was your monitoring. What's your monitoring situation looking like? How are you, like, for mixing?
Yeah, I've been using the Lynx Aurora conversion for a while. It sounded great since I purchased it. I've had it almost 10 years now, but I use that for A, D, D to A. So I'm coming out of there and do my, I use the dangerous monitoring, the dangerous source, and that goes out to, I'm using for mixing, for the longest time I was using NS10s, but I just got tired of them and I wanted to try something else. So now I'm using the higher end KRKs, the V6s. And I don't know, like a lot of people talk shit on KRK, but there's something about them, like they translate so well, and especially in my room, they just work so well in my room, and they do have a lot of bass for the size of the speaker. And when I need to, I'll switch to my other set of monitors for like the super sub low end stuff when I need to hear that, and which are I use the Kali LP8s for that. And if I need to like really blast something loud in the studio for a client, if they want to hear something really loud, I'll switch to those. But I'm monitoring at pretty low levels on the KRK V6s, and
Wow,
it's been working great. Yeah.
amazing. It's all about what you trust and what works for you, and like, yeah, if it translates, that's the most important thing. Like,
Yeah, and speaking of translating, like for monitoring, I for the longest time was like, because people were telling me to try what was that correction software? The sound. Oh my god.
oh yeah, Sound
it's
ID.
like that. Yeah, it was called something else. I think they.
Yeah,
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about though.
Yes,
that
of
white
course.
plugin
Yep.
With the room correction mic and all that.
Sonarworks.
I forgot.
Sonarworks.
Sonarworks. Yeah, a lot of people, like a few of my friends and engineers, are like, you should definitely try this, and I just never ended up doing it because like my room is tuned really well, and I have my trap set up to the point where like whatever I get like sounding good in here, like if I go to my car, it's pretty much there. Like obviously when you have to switch to a smartphone or a laptop, like things aren't going to sound exactly the same, obviously, but I just find like things are translating really well. So I haven't really found the need to go into the sound correction software,
Yeah, people either swear by it or don't.
And I also have like colleagues of mine that they started using it for a little bit and they said it was great, and then like they stopped using it for whatever reason. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I think as long as you have like your room is good and you trust your ears, and you've been working in the space for a while, and you know what to expect from your speakers, you know how it will translate into the car, into headphones and whatnot, I think you're pretty safe.
yeah, I agree. Yeah, totally. Got to trust the speakers, be in your space for a long enough time. So yeah, awesome. So we've talked about so many things in terms of like music, but I'd love to always ask a couple general questions and talk about like creative energies. And so yeah, do you have any habits, routines, anything you kind of do to keep yourself psyched to get in the studio and do the work that you do, extraneous from the work itself?
Yeah, it's a great question. For me, I like to listen to a lot of podcasts. I like to, when I can, like I like to go on hikes, just normal day-to-day things like that have nothing to do with music. It just really helps me clear my head. And like I'll listen to, I like to listen to like serial killer podcasts or like true crime, or like there's a show called I don't know if you heard of the Jordan Harbinger show.
No.
There's like different podcasts that are pretty much about anything else besides music. So, but I do listen to music ones, but like I also like to do 50-50. Like, okay, I have my favorite music podcasts, and I also have things that have absolutely nothing to do with it. And it just to keep my mind like active in other topics, you know what I mean? Because it's really easy to get like extremely submerged into music, and then you have no idea what the hell is going on with anything else. So you're just like, yeah. So I like to go on hikes, and I like to get in the studio. I kind of have like business hours. I try not to do the late sessions anymore because it's just too draining. You know, I lose after like 8 to 10 hours in the studio. I'm just no use to anybody.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'll do the 9 to 5. I'll do the 10 to 6, and then I'm good. Or, you know, obviously like a lot of the time if things need to go longer, I'll usually like go to 7 or 8, but I would say my average day is like 9 to 8. And I just like to keep a good balance, because it's really easy to, you know, just to get burnt out and overwork yourself, so that you're to the point where you're not really getting the greatest results if you had more rest and more time away. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Take it easy.
Yeah.
Do you take days off? You weekends?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. Most of the time I'm just Monday through Friday, and I try not to work on weekends anymore, just for my sanity.
Yeah.
So
So important. I don't know how people. Yeah. When people ask me to work on the weekend, I'm always like, I don't know.
Well, I understand, because like a lot of bands,
right?
They have a 9 to 5 job too. They have a 9 to 5 where they're working during the week, so their free time is on the weekend. So they're like, let's go record on the weekend. But then you need, you know, to find someone who's available on the weekend, and a lot of times they want to do like nights. So yeah, it's just, of course there's people that can accommodate that, but I'm just more of the like during the week, let's grind during the week and get everything done, and then have a couple days to wind down, and then get right back to it, you know?
Yeah, totally. I'm with you. Awesome. And just the final question of the show left, ask everybody this, you might be expecting it, but just kind of looking back on your journey, was there something that you did or didn't do that you'd want to impart on either your earlier self, or maybe somebody who's coming up now, you know, to be like a good piece of wisdom, to be like, yo, try this, or don't do this, stay away from that? What would be that one thing that you'd advise your earlier self or somebody coming up now?
Yeah, great question. I would say stay away from people who tell you can't do what you want to do. Like, stay away from people who, you know, discourage you. Stay away from people that just don't have, you know, that aren't there to bring you up, aren't there to support you. Because there's been so many times where it's like, you know, people have been like, oh, you'll never make it, or oh, you'll never be able to, you know, there's, you know what I'm saying? Like all those people that just are downers, and they don't believe in themselves, so they like take it out on other people. So
it's all everything is projection, like, at the end of the day, right?
So just stay away from people that are negative, that people that are that don't want you to succeed, because there's going to be a lot of those people, and just to power through and to stay true to yourself no matter what. Never give up, because it's a long road. It's a long game of, it's basically like the people that don't make it are the people that give up. Like, you know, I've heard so many people have talked about this. Like, if you have to be strong and keep pushing through it. And if it's what you truly love to do, you'll do it anyway. So it's like, you can't give up just because, oh, this project didn't work out, or, oh, I didn't make enough money this year, or I made less money this year than last year, so I must be a failure. Like, just keep going and it will pay off. Like, I'm at a point where I thought I would be, but I still have so much work to do, and I still have so many things I want to do. So it's like, just believe in yourself and never give up. That's what I would say. It's
like, almost sounds cliche, but it's so true, because it's like you said, like the people that are still doing it are the people that are still doing it. And it's like, it's as simple as that. It has nothing to do with how talented you are. Or I was talking to Bobby Osinski, and he was saying how that was the common thread of like all the people he's ever interviewed, and he's interviewed everybody. And he was
Yeah.
saying like it's just persistence, and like he was saying that oh man, what's his name? That Ed Cherney, who late great Ed Cherney was, he didn't have a hit till he was 40. He just kept working, and that's like literally it. Just it usually takes a decade or more to to find success.
Yeah. Another thing, like, don't let someone say, "Oh, you're too old to fucking make a record," or "You're too old to be a producer." Like, that's bullshit. You know what I mean? The age, like, maybe if you want to be like a pop artist, that's different. But like for audio engineering and like being, on the other side of the glass, like you can do it at any age. You know what I mean? It's not like, oh, you can't be over this age, or else like you're never gonna succeed. Like that's bullshit. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, totally. What's his name? I'm blanking on his name at this moment. The it's gonna come to me at the wrong time. He just passed away like a year ago. Al Schmidt.
Al Schmidt.
Like
yeah.
Al Schmidt was working until he died, in his 90s, So freaking do that, if you want.
Yeah.
If that's what you want to do,
Yeah.
So, yeah, dude. Well, Alex, it's been such a pleasure to meet you, get to schmooze with you and learn from you. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Thank you, Ben. It's been great. I really had a great time chatting with you and learning about you as well. And I really appreciate you, reaching out and asking me to be on. So thank you.
All right, for sure. Pleasure.